Being a part of a dying ancient clan was never easy, especially when you're the last remaining kin. You'd recall being sold off to royal families of different continents and empires. Some treated you with kindness and hospitality, though majority only bought you to be a pet and guard dog. But as time continued to consume your life, you'd come to realize that being bought didn't matter anymore, because no matter how bought you or sold you off, you'd always end up in a caged cell, a prize tag hanging off of your dirtied clothes. That quickly changed when the House of Troby brought you into their home. Many months had gone by, and yet they still didn't sell you off. Even when you'd turn into a panther, growling and hissing at the maids and butlers, they never screamed at you or threw you into the streets. You pondered at times why they decided to buy you. Was it because they were in need of a dog? Perhaps they need a maid? Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. And before you'd come to realize, you warmed up to the family, growing close with the children who were of your own age. Shamefully, you had only learned their names after 5 months of playing with them. Navier, Koshar, and Sovishu were their names, though Sovishu was not from the House of Troby, as you've learned. He was Navier's future wed. Throughout those years of getting to know the young couple, they never seemed to have serious arguments, nor did they seem to bear any feelings of hatred for each other. In fact, they seemed to look at each other as if each person held every precious treasure in their eyes. So, why? That bastard did what? His Majesty the Emperor has brought in a mistress. Why did he have to ruin the most beautiful thing he could have? I'm returning to the palace within a few days. That bastard's gonna learn the consequences of hurting Navier, you declared, drowning the last shot of liquor before slamming it down to the table. Koshar follows your actions as he nods, and once my exile is pardoned, I'll make sure that son of a bitch knows he's lost the best thing he could ever have. How dare he bring in a mistress? The blonde shouts next to you, shooting his fisted hands into the air in a drunken state. Chatters and laughter filled the atmosphere as the two drank and danced away the night, letting out the last of their fun before they are to continue with a tiring day of dealing with criminals and bandits when the sun is to rise. The morning arrives and the two are struck with the wretched curse of hangovers. Koshar, what the hell are you doing in my room? You groan, rubbing circles on your temple in an attempt to relieve your migraine, though your attempts prove to be futile when it worsens. You instead turn your attention to the noble beside you, his shirt thrown off elsewhere, the only garments covering his body being his pants. The sight is not a new one. Your years of training and growing together as fighters made you used to seeing each other almost bare, though that didn't stop you from admiring the chiseled abs he worked hard to achieve. Sorry. I must have thought this was mine, he mumbles, but makes no attempt to fully wake up, only hugging the pillow in his arms tighter. Though he's denied it multiple times in his head, he knows he wishes the pillow was you instead. Yeah, right, you answer, rolling your eyes before forcefully grabbing the pillow and kicking him out, telling him to go prepare for the day in his own room. I still don't understand why you tag along with us, when you could be walking around the imperial castle in comfort, Marcus Farang calls out, stepping out from his own room. Both of you were practically screaming out your lungs last night. I'm surprised the innkeeper still hasn't kicked either of you. You and Koshar laugh, waving him off before heading downstairs to the exit. Your thoughts drift as you walk, from the possible criminals you would have the possibility to encounter, to the mistress the Emperor had brought in. Wait. THEFIGMISTRESSTEEEAOTA, you screech, stopping in your tracks and pulling at your hair. You'd nearly forgotten about that wench. You ignore the stares of your close friends as you have a mental breakdown. Right, The celebration for New Year's is coming in a few days. By then, you should already be finished with exploring a good number of places. Though you prayed you wouldn't stray too far from the Empire by then. You're going to visit Navier on the first night of New Year, aren't you? Koshar speaks from beside you, massaging his temple as he lets a small smile stretch through his lips. Well, make sure to tell her that I miss her dearly when you arrive. You sigh before smiling in return, all right? But you have to remind me when I leave. I might just wind up forgetting. You warn him, your warm smile turning into a teasing one. The days go by faster than you'd prefer. Though you were most definitely eager to return, you also enjoyed embarking on trips with both of your closest friends. When it comes to visiting unexplored and most definitely dangerous places, there was never a dull moment. Be safe, Koshar reminds you, patting your head. By now, you've already shifted into a coated leopard, or as most would prefer to say, a panther. The sun had long fallen, the moon now high up in the sky, the stars by its side, twinkling in pure delight. It was only a few hours away from New Year's, but you're sure by the time you arrive, the Empress and Emperor would still be preparing for the celebration. You began your journey back to the Empire after Koshar sends you off, along with Marquis Farang, who waves you off with good wishes. On your way, you encounter a few traveling merchants, some on the verge of falling asleep, some stopping on the way to rest. You also encounter a few other people who were fortunately too afraid to approach you. It wasn't like they'd be able to. You were running the fastest you could as a four-legged animal. It isn't far too long before the vast empire is in sight, though it certainly took time and a big effort on your part. You slip through the guards of the castle and climb up to the Empress' bedroom balcony. You're surprised when you meet eyes with a golden bird, eyes twinkling with fluster, though it's quick to shift to one of alarm and aggression when it spots you. The same emotions flash through your eyes when you quickly observe that it is not a regular bird, but instead member of the dying bird clan. Was he sent here to spy on the Empress, Navier? What was it doing, crouching down and facing away from her room in the first place? Your thoughts are interrupted when a startled and surprised voice calls out your name. I/N. What are you doing here? It's Navier, her hair neatly styled into a waterfall braid. She was only half-dressed, still yet to wear the extravagant gown that you're sure would steal the breath of all, even the gods above the high clouds. You hop into her room without effort, slipping under the blankets of her bed before shifting back into a human, your body now bare. She doesn't seem to mind, as she's had it happen far too many times before she began her reign as the Empress, though Countess Eliza is the one who is instead irritated, glaring at you with her hands placed on her hips. You slip your head out from below the blankets and smiled apologetically at the lady-in-waiting. You stand from her bed, the warm and fluffy blanket wrapped securely around your shoulders. You watch patiently as Countess Eliza rushed out to bring you clothes, most probably formal ones, as Navier looked like she wanted you to attend the New Year's celebration banquet. You take a deep breath before finally speaking. I heard about Soviet and the whore he brought into the imperial palace. I believe it is only right that I beat him until he is back to his senses. Please don't be like that. Let's enjoy the first night of a new and hopefully fruitful year. Yes? She interrupts you before you could hurl out profanities. You frown, eyebrows creasing. I'm going to kill those two once I see them. Frustration began to seep into your mixed emotions of rage and resentment. You'd almost forgotten about the golden bird until it chirped, seemingly agreeing with you. You laugh inwardly. Please be careful of what you say. Your words could be used against you even when you speak out of pure emotion. Navier warns, ignoring the reason for your anger as she places soothing hands on your covered shoulders, hoping it would help calm you down. You sigh. Fine, but if that bitch does anything to you, I'll make sure my words will prove truthful. You promise her, turning your head to glare at the wall. She sighs before turning to pay attention to the bird, the worry in her eyes dissipating into fondness as she pets the bird gently. You and I/N still haven't properly met, no? She perks up and turns to you, gesturing for you to come closer. You do, eyes boring holes into the bird, wondering if Navier is aware that this little creature was human. You decide not to question it, and instead move your hands to pet it with the same gentleness Navier has. This is Queen. He just suddenly appeared one day with a note on one of his legs. I read the note, and soon enough, his master and I turned into well-fond pen pals. She explains, smiling brightly. You feel your heart soften at the sight of her excited smile. Ever since becoming the Empress, it has been a rare sight to see her smile in such a way. Wait, why'd you name him Queen then? Before she could answer, the door swings open. Lady, I've brought your clothes. Come, I'll assist you in changing. Countess Eliza returns with a plain ball gown, few lace designs adorning the loose and weightless skirt. In her other hand is a pair of shoes. Heels not too high, as she was well aware that you'd only end up tripping an alarming amount of times in higher-heeled shoes. It doesn't take long her to dress you, her hands swiftly styling your hair immediately after. You smile and turn towards the Countess once you're done, grateful that she'd chosen a dress you wouldn't end up suffering in whenever you moved. You follow her towards the mirror, surprised to see your features matching with the dress all too well. You grin and strike a pose, to which Navier and the Countess laugh at. The bird had long faced itself away, out of shyness. When you're escorted to the ballroom, there are already several noble guests walking around and chattering amongst themselves. Although you were upset you couldn't go in together with Navier, you had no choice but to accept tradition. The Emperor and the Empress have always made a grand entrance. Your eyes search around for a face that could potentially be the Emperor's mistress. If you're lucky, you might just have the chance to poison her. But alas, if that scenario were to ever happen and she dies, you know you're the first to be blamed. Much like Koshar, you're known for your violent ways and your habit of acting upon impulse. So if the mistress were to die around the same time you've arrived in the imperial castle, all fingers would be pointed to you. Lady? A familiar voice calls out, a hand gracing over your shoulder. You turn, eyes meeting with one of the most popular members of high society, Duchess Tuania. You gleam and hug her, Duchess. It's been too long, you exclaim, feeling her arms wrap around you to reciprocate the hug. And after a while, she pulls away first. I'm happy to see you as well. Lady, her peach-colored lips curl into a soft smile. You're usually out with Lord Koshar and his friend? What brings you to this year's celebration? She questions, her formal tone dropping by the smallest bit. Actually, I heard about Soviet's mistress, so I came here with the intention of beating His Majesty. You quietly exclaim a little too happily, worrying the Duchess, but she's sure Navier had told you not to do so. Speaking of mistress, where's that bitch? You look around before turning your attention back to Duchess Tuania. I believe she's that white-haired woman over there. It seems the foreign nobles have taken a liking to her. The Duchess sighs, inwardly glaring at the concubine. But do not cause her any trouble. I fear that would only worsen Her Majesty's case. Please, have a drink instead. The Ravenet turns towards a waiter, signaling that he give you the wine. You graciously accept the wine, swirling it in the glass before taking a sip. Your eyes sparkle as you take in the new flavor. What wine is this? I don't believe I've tasted this before. You raise your head to the Duchess with sparkling eyes, and she laughs at your expression. It's strawberry wine. I heard the Empress herself arranged this banquet, so you have her to thank. Before you could nod, the ballroom stills, the music halting, its melodies. It must be time for Navier and Sovietshu to make their entrances. You think to yourself before turning towards the grand stairs, where the Emperor and Empress walk down, hand in hand. However, the Emperor is quick to move away from Navier once they reach the bottom of the stairs, his feet moving towards the famous mistress. When Navier spots Rashta amongst the circle of foreign nobles, a wave of bitterness flashes through her eyes and her lips tug down to a frown. I think I spot Baron Lant over there. You should greet him. It has been a while since you two have seen each other. No? He must be missing you quite a bit considering how lovesick he's been for you. The Duchess interrupts you before you could approach the Empress. But Navier, it's all right. I'll speak to Her Majesty. She smiles gently, assuring you that she'll make sure to lift the Empress' mood. You nod hesitantly before turning your heels, walking towards the Baron who conversed with other nobles. Most likely talking about the financial standpoint of the imperial family, considering that managing money was more his forte. Once you join their circle, you greet them with a bow, knowing that once you'd be spotted breaking the etiquette rules, you'd immediately be shamed and scolded by the higher society. Fine night, isn't it, gentlemen? From the corner of your eye, you swore you could see comical dog ears and tails on Baron Lant, his eyes beaming at you as his tail wags enthusiastically. You fight back a laugh, covering your quivering smile with the glass of wine you held. It takes a few scrutinizing moments before the nobles excuse themselves to talk with the rest of the guests, and the moment they leave, Lant happily hugs you, exclaiming your name in a fond whisper. Lady UA/N, you've returned. He greets once more, only this time he's more relaxed with the higher members gone. You laugh and return the hug. Yes, I returned just a few hours ago to see the Empress. You separate from the hug, ignoring the quiet noise of protest from him. I heard His Majesty the Emperor recently took in a mistress, so I've come to politely welcome her into the royal family. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. The Baron pauses, sweat dripping from his pores as he avoids eye contact. My lady, I assure you, His Majesty's mistress isn't all too bad. You cross your arms, shifting your weight to one foot as you raise an eyebrow at him. Isn't too bad? Oh, please. I don't give the slightest fuck about how bad she is. I've lost all respect for her the moment she decided and accepted to be the Emperor's mistress. The Empress and the Emperor have always been close lovers, and that wench dare destroy that relationship? And even so, the Emperor dare throw away what he had with Navier for some lowly whore he found? Your harsh words made the Baron wince. He wanted to disagree with you, to tell you that the concubine had the heart of an angel and the gentle touch of a loving mother. But he didn't dare utter a word in fear of getting to your bad side. He was truly lovesick after all. He nods in feigned agreement, swiftly changing the topic before you could continue on with your words. God only knows how hard Rashta would cry when she hears you talking down on her name. Before long, it is the Emperor and the Empress' turn to have the first dance. It took all the strength in you not to jump into the dance floor and throw the white-haired woman off the roof when you saw her dancing gleefully with Sovietshu. Well, the only thing that held you back was the sight of Navier dancing with a foreign prince. One you recognized to be the Prince of the Western Kingdom. As they dance, you see the way Navier smiles at him, her eyes softening by the slightest bit. They laugh together, seemingly lost in their own world as they converse. However, the longer you stare at the prince, the longer you recognize the features to be similar to Queen's. And once you put two and two together, you realize that the Prince of the Western Kingdom was indeed the bird who delivered Navier letters. You scowl at the thought. Sure, the prince held a beauty no other man could compare to. But there were rumors circulating about him being a Casanova. Did he plan to simply play around with Navier before throwing her heart to the dumpsters? Once the first dance is finished, you stride towards the prince before Baron Lant could ask you to dance. You ignore his silent calls and only continued to walk towards Heinley, who was talking with Rashta. You step in between the two, ignoring the surprised Silverette and Beau to the Western Prince with a knowing smile. "May I have this dance, Your Highness?" You share a look with him, your eyes telling him you wanted to use this opportunity to shame the concubine and to have a conversation. He smiles charmingly. "Of course, I do hope you'll be able to keep up with my dancing skills." He takes your extended hand and pulls you towards the center, ignoring Rashta gleefully. You place your hand on his shoulder and let the other rest on his open hand, his other free hand securing its place on your waist. Forgive me if I'm too bold with my words, but are you perhaps the cheeky little bird Navier is fond of? You ask, but you already know he is, despite whatever protest he'd come with. He's aware of this too, and laughs. I'm sure the fair lady is aware of that answer. Mind if I take my turn to interrogate? He twirls you with the music. You almost trip, surprised, but you're quick to regain composure. Too bad he's already laughing at you. What is your and the Empress relationship? You click your tongue and step on his foot. She and I are very close friends. He bites his inner cheek to stop himself from yelping out in pain. That doesn't answer my question. His words are cut off by the Emperor exclaiming Rashta's name. You sigh, turning your attention to the two lovers who are quick to shamelessly embrace each other, and then to Navier, who stares at them with indifferent eyes. People whisper, their attention now placed on the royal couple and the mistress. Oh my, right in front of Her Majesty? The rumor that he fell head over heels for his mistress must be true. It seems that way. You scowl, glaring at the nobles who immediately shut their mouths once they notice that your eyes are set on them. Navier swivels away from the crowd, heading towards the darkened halls. You turn to the prince, ready to tell him to go after her and comfort her. But he's already gone, following the path of the disheartened empress. A sigh, this time one of comfort and relief, leaves your lips. But your relaxed shoulders soon tense and aggress when the emperor walks towards you, a displeased look plastered on his features, while the whore he took in clings to his arms, tears rolling down her cheeks. You scoff, crossing your arms. Why, I was having a favorable time with the prince. You start, not breaking eye contact with the emperor. I think it's rather rude that you couldn't bother waiting for your turn. Sovieshu retorts, referring to how you took your time to step in between the two before the dance. The woman next to him doesn't speak, only looking at you with teary eyes. Oh, please. If you'd seen how uncomfortable the prince was in front of this, you stop yourself before you call her whore woman. Nearly anyone would have stepped in to save the poor guy. You should have taught her at least a few etiquette lessons before bringing her into such a grand celebration. Rashta blushes, embarrassment flooding her veins as the nobles hide a snicker. Sovieshu clicks his tongue, but you speak once more before he could retort. And she's crying for what reason again? Because she has no one to dance with? How absurd. She's like a child trapped within the body of a grown woman. Rather humiliating to the royal family if you'd ask me. You laugh, turning your head to look at Rashta in her eyes. What do you know about the royal family? If anything, you were a lowly pet before. Emperor. I'd suggest you not continue that sentence if you don't want this grand celebration to turn into an unfortunate manslaughter. You whisper under your breath, a half-opened mouth smile stretching your lips, eyes staring into his. He quickly shuts his mouth, jaw clenching as he watches your eyes gleam with mischief and threat. Rashta, find another nobleman to dance with. Prince Heinley isn't worth your tears. He turns towards his mistress, hands caressing her cheeks as he wipes away the waterfall of tears. The woman nods, walking away before turning to share a glance with you over her shoulder. You throw a feigned, friendly smile at her, waving your hands to say goodbye. She feels a shiver run down her shoulder, knowing that your smile was a warning. Sovishu shakes his head, pinching his nose bridge in irritation. Was that necessary? Was taking in a mistress necessary when you already had a happy relationship with Navier? He doesn't respond. You scoff. Congrats on getting a whore. You mutter under your breath and turn your heels, walking towards the bar stand, ready to drown in alcohol once more. The melodies of a bird song is what wakes you. A sore ache spreads throughout your body as you open your eyes, closing them again when the bright light of the sun burns your sight. You grunt at the feeling, pulling the blankets over your head to shield your eyesight from the unyielding sun rays. It takes you a moment to register that you're naked under the blankets, and that an arm is looped around your waist. You shriek in surprise, springing out of the bed with the blankets in an attempt to shield your bare body from whoever you slept with under the influence. You're surprised when you see Baron Lant curled up, his top thrown off the other side of the room, his pants still on, thankfully. You examine the hickeys on his upper chest and neck, assuming it had been your work. He groans when the sun hits his face, eyes opening slowly to adjust to the light, before he turns toward you. Silence fills the room for a moment before he screams in surprise, falling off of the bed in the process. Lady I/N, he exclaims, looking surprised when he takes in the fact that you're naked underneath the blanket you held. He quickly moved to bow, knees and forehead to the marbled floors. My lady, please don't misunderstand. We didn't do anything past kissing. Then why do you and I have hickeys? You'd started kissing them onto me before you forced my head to your chest, insisting that I give you kisses too. Why do you listen? You wouldn't let go of my head, my lady? If what you're saying is true, then why am I naked? I don't know either, lady I/N. When you'd passed out, you were fully clothed, I swear on my life. You undressed me in my sleep. I wouldn't dare do such a disgraceful thing. I swear. Why was my body sore and why were your arms around me? You continued to twist in turn, so I'd put my arm around you to prevent you from falling off of the bed, lady I/N. You continued to scream and argue back and forth until he urged you to calm down so he'd explain everything in a calmer manner. Once he'd explained more calmly, you apologized profusely, finding out that while you were drunk, you dragged him around before he took you into his room to rest, which ended up with you pushing him into the bed for a strange make-out session, which led to you kissing him hickeys. Thankfully, you had passed out before you could continue any further. But he explained that the trouble didn't end there. When you were asleep, you continued to twist and turn into uncomfortable positions, to which he made the courageous decision to wrap an arm around you. But in the end, you still slept in an uncomfortable position. You're rather rowdy when you're drunk, lady I/N. He sighs stressfully, ruffling his untied hair. I'm sorry. He laughs. It's truly all right. It was an oddly fun experience. Anyways, it's been halfway through the morning. I'd suggest we get ready for the day, my lady. You should change into your dress from tonight and head over to your room. I'll turn away. He stands from the cushion of the bed, walking to a wall and just staring at the paint, having a mental crisis while he smiles to himself. Thank you, Baron Lant. I'll be sure to repay you. You hum out before leaving his room to walk towards the opposite end of the palace, where your room was. You ignore the stares of the passing maids and butlers, focusing your eyes on the floor, words of emotional support going through your thoughts. It was the second day of the New Year's Day ceremony, and several royalty from different continents would be coming to visit. You hum, thinking back to the New Year's ceremonies from the past years. There were only a handful of people that you got on your side, and amongst them, The only ones you've come to favor were Princess Circe of the Southern Empire and Grand Duke Kaufman of Luipt. You often shared similar likes and dislikes with the princess, and with her, there was never a dull moment. She enjoyed the simpler pleasures of life and always found herself relating to you. The Grand Duke was a quiet man, often only speaking when needed, and seemed as if he could hear your thoughts, always ending up with you failing to hide anything from him. However, despite your dislike to his quiet nature, you always found yourself agreeing with his opinions and his sense of justice. He was a man you respected and often fell for. You're just thankful he couldn't read your thoughts. Otherwise, he'd already be aware of the dirty daydreams you'd have about him. Besides, no matter how skilled a mage is, they can't possibly read thoughts, right? Once you've freshened up with a shower and dressed in more comfortable clothes, you head out. The sound of your boots tapping against the jeweled marble tiles are the only thing that can be heard across the hallway as you stride, wondering where everyone had gone to. Lady E/N. You turn towards the source of the voice. A look of surprise flashing through your face once you meet eyes with Heinley, who was jogging towards you, a beaming smile on his face. Prince Heinley. You greet, bowing your head lightly. What brings you here? Your tone of formality has dropped, given that you were no longer in the presence of any nobleman. Our conversation last night was cut short. I hoped we could continue it today. His eyes trail down towards your collarbone, a teasing smirk making its way to his lips. It seems you had a bit of fun last night. How scandalous, he bats his eyelash, covering his mouth with his hand. You roll your eyes at his actions. I don't know why you've gotten so friendly with me and what's possessed you, but let's head to the garden to continue our conversation. The maids there will serve us snacks shortly. He chuckles and nods. It's only reasonable that I treat you with familiarity. You are one of Her Majesty the Empress' closest friends, after all. He follows you to the nearby garden, watching as you sent one look at the maids, and they nod with understanding, walking off to gather snacks from the kitchen. If he didn't know any better, he'd assume you were a member of royalty with the way you were so familiar around the palace and the maids. Despite his friendly attitude with you earlier, he knew he'd have to be more cautious with you. He'd asked his cousin and secretary to research about you, and despite a significant amount of your past being in the papers, he knew there were still missing parts. He takes a seat across from you, his smile still on his lips despite his thoughts. He opens his mouth to speak, but his words are cut off with yours. He stills. You're smarter than what I had originally is. Took you for, he admits with a chuckle of defeat, shrugging his shoulders. As his friendly smile drops, instead forming to a cold expression. Would you like to speak in private? I could have our maids leave once they've served us snacks. You offer, gesturing towards the ladies. You watch as he stays quiet for a few moments, before nodding, yes, I prefer that. You nod towards them, watching as they leave in a hurry, seemingly curious about your conversation with the prince. Well, Heinley, what is it that you want to know? You sip the tea, relishing the taste of honey and favorite tea flavor. It seems they still haven't forgotten your tea of choice, even when you're rarely in the imperial palace. I'd like to know what happened before you were taken in by the House of Troby. He blows onto the surface of his own tea before sipping, a pleased expression on his face once the flavors invade his senses. How forward. But I'll only give you an honest answer if you give me a good reason to. He raises an eyebrow before chuckling darkly. I'm simply asking these questions to make sure you're not a threat to Her Majesty. Lady E/N. His eyes stare through your soul, waiting for your response. He's surprised when you burst out laughing. We're both speaking to each other like you're closer to her than I. But no worries, my dear foreign prince. You emphasize the word foreign to remind him of his place, I've spent the majority of my life by Her Majesty's side as a friend, as a protector, and as a shoulder to cry on. If I were to ever betray her, I'd be throwing half my life away." Silence fills the atmosphere as a maid walks in without warning, placing the plated cookies and desserts on the table before rushing out, afraid that she might have made the atmosphere uncomfortable. Heinley waits for the maid to completely disappear before speaking his thoughts once more. "Words are not enough to assure my worried soul," he insists, despite knowing the honesty behind your words. It seems he's more than eager to know about your past. It almost alarms you how curious he gets. "By the way, you're looking at me? I take it that you want to know how I've buried documents about me too?" You drag on, and he nods impatiently. "I've simply asked the previous emperor to burn all signs and papers." He raises an eyebrow. "And how did you get the emperor to agree so easily?" You smile and decide to test him. "I'm from the House of Troby." "I was hoping for a more honest answer," he intervenes, taking a piece of cookie and biting down on it. He seemed more comfortable now that the snacks were here. "It seems I'm unable to hide much from you." "You shouldn't hide anything in the first place." "I understand. Now I'd appreciate if you stop interrupting." All right. Now, hurry on." He groans impatiently, slumping on the table with a wave of his hand. A tick mark appears on your forehead as you sigh, biting the inside of your cheek to suppress your irritation. "Well, there's not much. I was simply a slave that was sold from noble house to noble house." You rest your chin at the palm of your hand, taking one of the cupcakes from the tray, admiring the patterns and tiny candy decorations before biting into the frosting. "Oh, is that all?" "Of course." He hums out a noise of understanding. "I was expecting more if I were being honest." "I'm not that much of a special person, Prince Heinley." You inform him of the obvious, licking the frosting at the corner of your lips. "Any more questions?" "Actually, Lady I/N, I'm sorry to cut your conversation short, but Lord Koshar sent me." The familiar voice of Marquis Farang cuts Heinley off before he could continue. A noise of irritation leaves the blonde's lips. You laugh inwardly at his expression before turning towards the Marquis. "Why'd he send you?" "If possible, I'd like for us to speak privately. It will only be for a quick moment," he answers, staring at the foreign prince before looking back at you. You raise an eyebrow before turning to Heinley. "Excuse me. I'll be back. In the meantime, enjoy the snacks." You stand from your seat, walking towards Farang with a hum leaving your lips. The two of you walk a short distance, behind the garden where no one would hear and no maid would stand around. "I'll be honest. He sent me just to tell you that he misses you. He wouldn't stop nagging me until I agreed." He sighs, crossing his arms in irritation as he shakes his head. "I haven't even been gone for a full day." You sigh, shaking your head in disdain. "Well, tell him I won't be gone long. My stay won't last any longer than 2 days. I'll be back in the border by the time the New Year's celebration ends." You inform him, receiving a nod in response. "Well then, be safe on your journey, Farang." You wave, watching as he walks away with a few guard escorts. You walk back to the garden, spotting a blue-haired man standing by Heinley, looking irritated. He turns and flinches when he notices you standing by the entrance. "Hi." You greet with a smile. He awkwardly greets you back with a nod before excusing himself to leave. He passes by you, and you send him a wink, a smile following with it. You almost laugh aloud when he sweats even harder, rushing in his steps. Once he's gone, you turn towards Heinley and sit back on your chair, across from him as he sends you a raised eyebrow. You ignore it and instead smile. "Who was that?" "Quite the dashing man, I must say." You whistle, making Heinley gasp in shock. "That was my cousin and secretary, McKenna." "You have a rather odd taste." "Oh, please, I have an exquisite taste. Yes, if you say so, my lady. Anyway, shall we continue with our conversation? You nod, hiding a frown once you discover that your tea has gotten cold. What else were you hoping to talk about? Actually, I wanted to talk about what Empress Navier likes and dislikes. You sigh. It's the third day of New Year's celebration. And thankfully, you didn't end up in another person's bed. You'd immediately gone to sleep once the night had dawned upon the earth. You and Heinley spent a significant amount of time during the previous day, talking about different topics, ranging from how Navier was when she was younger to how bitchy and annoying Rashta was. And surprisingly, you enjoyed yourself. And after getting to know him much better, perhaps he was a perfect match for the Empress. Their personalities were an odd mix, which made it all the better. And you truly saw how dedicated the Western Prince was to make Navier happy. You walk along the hallway, admiring the different decorations and gemstones embedded on the ceiling. Some of the patterns telling you the tales and secrets history held. Some patterns whisper the lullabies of weeping mothers who've lost their children to slavery. Some patterns smile at you with the brightness of the Eastern Empire's success, while some cast shadows upon you, reminding you of the war that took place between the Eastern Empire and another empire, roughly 200 years ago. It still never made sense to you how the war was placed in a different continent, when it was a conflict between two empires from a faraway continent. You change your course of thoughts, not wanting to worry about something that's long past. You pass by the ballroom where the third banquet was being held, pausing when you hear the familiar voice of Heinley. From his tone, it would be obvious that he was stirring up more drama than needed. You furrow your eyebrows and shake your head. You ignore the commotion and continue walking towards the end of the hallway, humming different songs on the way. It was a boring day, and you wanted to relax before attending the last special banquet for tomorrow. There would be no doubt that it would drain most of your energy. No doubt Rashta would be there, judging from the way Sovishu defended her in front of countless nobles without hesitation. You find yourself in one of the newly built gardens. The fresh smell of violets and lavender fill your senses, and you feel yourself relax, the stress seemingly evaporating from your body. There, in the middle, a gazebo stood, painted and varnished with white paint. Round dining glass table and simple built chairs with beige cushions neatly placed within the structure. The calming sound of running water could be heard, as there was a large pond built behind the said gazebo, only being seen once you're seated within the structure. You take your time walking towards the gazebo, admiring the details and designs carefully put in place with dedication. From the way the bushes were neatly trimmed and shaped to the healthy bloomed flowers, it was obvious how much they cared for this place, despite it only being new and filled with zero to no memories. Once you're seated, you scoot closer to the railings to fully take in the view of the clear pond. The exported koi fish swimming with luxury and glee is the first thing you notice. Then you notice the small castles placed within the water, a few fishes swimming through and in the building. It seems like you're enjoying the garden. I/N. You jolt out of your thoughts once you hear the voice of Navier. You turn and greet her and her ladies-in-waiting with a smile. Navier, what brings you here? Aren't you supposed to be at the banquet? You question as you scoot your chair back to its original place, while the blonde empress takes her seat across from you. I just needed some fresh air. Aren't you supposed to be attending the banquet? I have not seen you there at all. She counters, patiently waiting as Countess Jobert pours her tea. You chuckle, keeping your mouth shut once you realize she's caught you abandoning one of your simple duties as a noble lady. The food is shortly delivered by a handful of maids who quickly leave. How is Koshar doing? Is he still as reckless as he was back then? Navier starts, sipping her tea. Her eyes stay on the red velvet-flavored cake, sparkles in them as she immediately puts a cut piece on her plate, once she's placed her teacup down. Well, of course. Some things just don't change. Sometimes for the better, you know? He misses you a lot, by the way. He never misses a day where he doesn't mention wanting to see you, you answer, watching as she bites onto the sweet dessert, chewing with delight. She smiles at your answer, eyes softening as she nods. Tell him I miss him too, and that I don't ever go by a day without the thought of him. Though I just wish that by the time he returns, he doesn't cause trouble when he finds out about Miss Rashta. A sigh leaves her lips, knowing that her wish would most likely be impossible to grant. But, hey, an empress can dream. Don't worry about it too much, Navier. I'll try to get him to behave when he's done with his exile. You assure her, a chuckle leaving your lips. Say, lady, I/N. Aren't you lovers with Lord Koshar? Surely you can prevent him from doing anything too rash, Laura exclaims, before whispering, but don't hold him back too much. Some people deserve what's coming for them. You choke on the cookie you're chewing at the brunette's words, Countess Jobert immediately rushing behind you to pat your back. Once you've composed yourself, you look at the confused Laura, who flushed and averted her gaze to the other ladies in waiting, wondering what she said wrong. You sweat drop, Miss Laura. Lord Koshar and I aren't lovers. We're just friends, you exclaim, laughing at her horrified expression. She profusely apologizes, bowing without a sign of stopping. Miss Laura, it's okay. It's a misunderstanding a lot of people seem to have. He and I are closer friends than most after all. Words of assurance leave your lips to calm her flushed state. A sigh of relief leaves your lips once she finally stops. Though she still seems feel rather embarrassed, judging from the way she avoids your stare. Navier laughs softly at the scene, a memory coming to mind as she stares at you. No words leaving her lips as she recalls the time Koshar approached her when they were kids, a confused yet cheerful look on his face. Hey, Navier, do you think if I give this rich-looking sword to I/N, she'll marry me? The blonde boy asks the future empress of the Eastern Empire, hands carefully holding onto a luxurious sword, gold and other rarer ores embedded onto the weapon. Navier feels a sweat drip down her cheek, knowing that you wouldn't appreciate a sword, given how you'd usually react to any kind of weapon. She never understood why you were so angry at mere blades that wouldn't touch you unless it was in an enemy's hold. But she couldn't bring herself to ask you. She couldn't bring herself to tell Koshar you'd hate it, seeing how happy and excited he looked to give the sword. So she nods instead of speaking, averting her gaze immediately to fight the guilt that immediately began to seep in. At the sight of her approval, Koshar beams and runs off to your room, scenarios in his head taking place in which you happily accept the sword, agreeing to be his wife, and you and him run off together in that sunset, hand in hand. He knocks, once, twice, and then the grand doors open, revealing an irritated H/C haired girl, you. The hell do you want? You mumble, rubbing your eyes as you yawn, hair messy from the turning and moving around you did as you slept on the undeniably comfortable bed. I was sleeping. Make it quick. You huff, crossing your arms. Koshar hesitates, debating whether to give you the sword now or to leave and make up an excuse for knocking on your door. He decides it's better to go for the former, knowing that if he'd gone with the latter, you'd only end up more irritated. He reveals the sword that he's been holding behind his back, a crooked smile on his lips forming as he does. I brought you a gift. He starts, closing his eyes and looking away, afraid of seeing your reaction. His chubby cheeks puffs out of nervousness as he waits for you to speak. His pulse quickens, sweat forming at his pores. He opens his eyes once he feels the weapon is lifted from his hold, eyes glancing at your shocked expression. Where did you get this? You ask him, admiring the gold and jewelry embedded into the grip, an emerald jade centered into the pommel, and the rain guard designed with perfection and dedication. I ask Father to lend me some budget whenever I didn't cause trouble. The blonde explains, twiddling with his fingers. Do you like it? You sigh and smile. I do. But you didn't have to get this for me, Koshar. It's not even my birthday. He doesn't provide you a response, and instead runs off, hands in the air as he shouts happily, surprising most of the workers who passed by him. Koshar only continued to give you gifts from then on, ranging from flowers to simple local snack when he didn't have enough money, and jewelry to rare items when he had too much money in his pocket. Navier seldom saw you wear the jewelry, so she could only assume you kept his gifts in a safe place. It's getting quite late. I'd better head back to my quarters. You hum, standing from your seat and stretching your arms up. You feel a few bones pop. A smile of satisfaction tugs at your lips from the feeling. Isn't it far too early to head to bed? I'm sure you don't usually head to bed this early on. Navier questions, looking at you with the expressionless face you've grown used to. I have some business to attend to, is all you say before walking away, the sound of your boots tapping on the pavement being the only thing that's heard as you move further away from them. The Empress stares at your retreating form. I didn't get to ask her what she spoke about with Prince Heinley yesterday. She thinks to herself, inwardly frowning at the missed opportunity. She could always ask you another time, but she'd be far too busy making preparations for the last banquet, and she knows you'd be gone by the time the banquet is done with. A sigh leaves her lips as she stands, walking back to her office to get some paperwork done. When she'd seen you and the Western Prince conversing with smiles on your faces yesterday, she felt a clawing curiosity. It had been the first time she's seen you look so contented in a while, speaking to someone, and she's never seen Heinley so happy while talking. Perhaps it was because she's never paid attention to how Heinley's eyes lit up whenever she spoke his name and title, or the way he so obviously tried to stop himself from holding her hand whenever they were within his fleeting reach. From afar, one would say he was like a teenage boy in love. The sweet innocence of his actions, the adornment in his eyes, it all went unnoticed by her. Kinda scandalous of you to be in my bedroom alone with me, Prince Heinley. You voice out, eyeing the golden bird that sat on your open balcony, shivering in the cold air. It hops into your room, gesturing for you to close the balcony doors with his wings. You do, gently closing the glass doors with a click. With a hum, you move towards your closet, digging for one of your old blankets. You tug out a silk sheet from the very back, grinning in victory once you've pulled it out. Turning to the bird, you dropped it on the bird-brain prince, waiting for him to turn back into a human. He does, smoke filling the space where the golden bird once was. Once the smoke clears out, the figure of a naked Heinley wrapping himself up tightly with the blanket you put on him. You whistle teasingly as he sends you an embarrassed glare. If you're so uncomfortable with being alone in a room with me while you're naked, you should have. I don't know, walk to my room as a human? You suggest turning around to give him at least the privacy he felt comfortable in. The prince is surprised by the immense lack of formality in your tone, genuinely shocked by the change. Perhaps it was the effect being in a noble circle did to people. Your room is right by Queen's open door. I don't want her to get the wrong idea, he explains, taking a seat in front of your paper-stacked table. He scans over the papers, reading the gathered investigation details about bandit hideouts and criminal organizations. Some still have missing details. Some have been fully completed, marked with red. He guessed you'd already taken care of them. Though one thing that piqued his interest was that most of them were far from the city and closer to the borders. Surely you didn't come here just to look around my things. You interject before he could touch the papers. He pauses. Is it right for me to assume that you've been invited to the special banquet tomorrow? Your eyebrow raises at his question. Of course. I'm one of Navier's closest friends after all. You hum, walking towards your table, eyes avoiding his bare body as you picked up the papers that were still left unmarked. You lean onto the table, half sitting on the edge of the table as you wait for his answer. The emperor's concubine is pretending to be queen. He blurts out. You choke on your spit, wondering what he had meant by that. Was she claiming to be the empress of the Eastern Empire to foreign nobles? You glance at him, eyes asking for an answer. She claimed to be my pen pal in the middle of a crowd earlier in the banquet. What did you do? Did you embarrass her? He shakes his head, having the audacity to take your marked papers to read through it, even after you had swatted his hands when he tried to touch them. I thought I'd embarrass her further for the last day of the banquet. A chuckle leaves your lips, and the reason you came to me is because you want my help in further ruining her image? He grins at your answer, correct? Silence fills the room for a moment, the only sounds being the crickets humming from outside, creating rather irritating melodies when compared to that of a bird's. The whistle of the winds had died down, softly swaying the leaves in the gardens. It was a peaceful night at most, and a part of you was glad you were no longer forced to sleep through the cheers and shouts of drunken men from outside of the window. Well, what do you want me to do? You ask, placing the papers down on the desk behind you. Call her out whenever she lies. That's all? He nods, shifting through your papers before he turns his head to look at you. Do you mind if I ask you a favor? Depends on what kind of favor it is. These papers suggest that you've already dealt with all criminals listed. And I must say, your research is very impressive. Some have very minimal clues about their locations, and yet you've managed to find them. So, if it would be all right, could you deal with escaped criminals in the Western Kingdom too? He worded carefully, leaning back on his chair. You chuckle and placed a hand on your chest. I'm flattered, Prince Heinley. But I'll only accept if you give me a very generous amount of payment, and that I only deal with the ones far from populated places. The prince raises an eyebrow at your second request. Why away from the city? Don't you want recognition for your oh-so-heroic deeds? He grows more confused at the grin that displaces on your lips, and feels a chill run up his spine when he sees a glint in your eyes. I have my own personal reason, Prince Heinley. His throat pushes out a breathless chuckle. I'm not sure if I should be declaring a war for your threat or not. My goodness, I'm not threatening you. When have I said such things that would suggest I was threatening you? You question, almost in a mocking tone. Well, is our deal sealed? You switch topics, eyes relaxing back into more friendly tones. It surprised him how easily you could switch certain emotions on and off. Well, I suppose so, if that's the only way to get you to accept it. He sighs, eyebrows curving with feigned annoyance as his shoulders raised to a shrug. He truly didn't mind. All he wanted to know was your reasonings. But he was only answered with what he well knows was a threat. Not once did he ever predict that he, the Western Kingdom's king-to-be, would be threatened. All right, deal is sealed. Now off you go. We have nothing else to talk about. Goodbye. You quickly say, pushing him out of the chair as he makes a noise of surprise. Once the doors to the balcony open, he quickly turns into a bird, knowing that if he stays human for a little longer, the wind would blow away the only clothing that covered his body. The only people he'd allow to see him naked would be his own family and the Empress of the Eastern Kingdom. You chuckle at the sight of him hurriedly flying away. Oh my. Is that Queen? I think it is. He came from Lady Y/NS room, it seems. You flinch at the murmurs that come from the balcony next door. Navier's room, to be more precise. No worries. Queen's owner's cousin just sent me a love letter with ecstatic approval. You quickly lie, worried that it would cause unnecessary misunderstanding. You'd have to apologize to McKenna if your lie ever causes more trouble than it should. You weren't even sure if Navier knew who Queen's owner was, much less know who Queen himself actually was. The ladies-in-waiting squealed excitedly, telling the blonde about what you said. Lady I/N has finally found a lover. You feel a sweat dribble down your chin at their reactions, not expecting it. Sure, it had been a long time since you found a new lover, but you're sure it wasn't that long ago, right? Congratulations, I/N. I'm happy to see that you've finally gotten over that night from when we were 10, she teases, referring to the time when you'd had a crush on one of the knights that often guarded the entrance to the courtyard. You frown childishly and cross your arms. See, mon Navier, I was a kid. You whine, feeling embarrassment rising to your cheeks in the form of a red hue. She laughs, apologizing without much genuine guilt. It was time for the dinner with other imperial nobles. The sky gently cradled the moon as its comforting glow illuminated the earth. Things were going smoothly. They had picked out a proper dress that would suit you well and would most likely attract the most attention. After all, you were still well liked by men and women despite your image of acting irrationally. And if we're being truthful, it did inflate your ego quite a bit. Are you ready to go, lady I/N? You turn away from the mirror, nodding at the maid who turned red at the smirk tugging at your lips. Yes. Shall we go? She nods bashfully, immediately turning towards the hall and began walking to the room where the dinner would take place. If you'd remembered correctly, you would be the last to arrive. The best shall be saved for last. You could imagine Navier glaring holes into your head when you arrive. It doesn't take long before you reach the dining room, the atmosphere awkward and stiff. The maid quickly leaves before you could bid her goodbye. Perhaps she knew you would tease her. You take the empty seat beside Archduke Kaufmann, smiling widely when he turns to you with a small smile, greeting you with a court nod. You greet him with one exchange, mentally preparing to be in your best behavior. Well, for now at least. If the silver-haired mistress were to disrespect Navier, you'd have to bite her back whether anyone likes it or not. Although you weren't the type to stir up much trauma, boredom was a feeling that would eventually drive the human mind to act irrationally. And frankly, you were bored with how quiet and tense it was. Sure, it was awkward between Heinle, Sovishu, and Rashta, but they weren't really doing anything besides bark at each other. You're being very disrespectful, Prince Heinle. Sovishu slammed the glass of wine in his hands, the liquor spilling out of the glass and onto his hands. The room grows even colder, the tension thickening on itself. The other nobles, including yourself, turn towards the Emperor of the Eastern Empire, who's glaring at the Prince of the Western Empire with irritated eyes. What's disrespectful about pointing out her mistakes? She said she's the recipient of my letters, but she doesn't seem to know the half of it. If she was impersonating my lady, isn't it only natural that I'd try to protect my lady's honor? Oh, although my pen pal might be a gentleman instead of a lady. There's a pause as Heinle turns towards Rashta, an irritate look in his eyes. I'm feeling terribly offended by your servant and by Lady Rashta. Are you slighting the Western Kingdom, or me? Rashta clearly told you that she had momentarily gotten the contents of the letters mixed up. Sovishu insists, desperate to defend his one and only mistress. Sometimes you'd feel pity for his blindness and most of the time, annoyance for his foolishness. He was a better version of himself when he was 19, more rational and doesn't go warring around with women he finds in the forest. The Western Prince leans on his chair, folding his hands behind his head in a relaxed manner, and I clearly said that it's bizarre that my pen pal would get over half of the letter's contents confused. Prince Heinle, the Emperor roars, eyes squinting in a glare. The blonde doesn't back down despite Sovieshu's anger, and only dares the Ravenet for more when he stands from his chair. Everyone, am I the strange one here? Yesterday, Lady Rashta here said herself that she was the recipient of my letters. And I trusted her words without an inkling of suspicion, because I thought a distinguished lady such as herself wouldn't lie. And as Princess Circle put it, I treated her as sweetly as a cream puff. Heinley glances to your direction for a moment before swiftly looking away. Did he want you to say something now? But the timing isn't quite right yet. You're so mean. A petite voice sobs. Ah, so the timing has become right. You grin, waiting for her to continue. Perhaps one of your developing hobbies would be insulting and degrading her. Wouldn't be too bad of a hobby unless she decides to do something right for once in her life. It's because, she sobs, it's because I'm not of high social standing or sophisticated, and that's why you're drawing a line. You take those words as your cue to laugh aloud, a hand moving to cover your upper features for more dramatic effect. Ah, my, you surely do enjoy insulting nobles, Lady Rashta. Do you really believe a gentlemanly prince, such as Prince Heinley, would truly mistreat a lady because of a mere status? Believe it or not, but we are actually quite decent people. Standing from your chair, you ignore the glare of Navier. And you not standing of high social standing? You are the mistress of the oh-so-praised emperor, basically higher than all nobles below the empress. Are you, perhaps? You hum, staring and watching each crocodile tear that fell from her cheek, saying that you are indeed, as the rumors say, a slave? You smile at her knowingly before turning to grin at Sovishu next, cheering in victory once you see the embarrassed look on Rashta. And I must add, no woman on earth is truly innocent and harmless, my dear Emperor. We all have our dirty and cruel little secrets to hide. Sovishu glares at you, mouthing a warning. But you only ignore it and turn towards Heinley, who was visibly delighted. You weren't truly sure if Rashta actually had her own secrets to hide. However, you had the feeling that she hides more than one could ever expect. I didn't want to get involved, but I should correct everyone's misunderstanding. This time, Navier rises from her seat. Your Majesty, I know the individual Prince Heinley was sending letters to. It's not Rashta. The silver-head mistress visibly flinches, eyes widening in horror as Heinley smiles. You shouldn't take Prince Heinley's side because you despise Rashta, Empress. You scoff loudly at the words that left Sovishu's mouth, becoming more and more annoyed with how the man would take Rashta's ride even when all facts are against her. You curse under your breath and glare at the floor with crossed arms. It seems the Emperor only believes whatever Lady Rashta says. Ah, Prince Heinley had taken the words right out of your mouth. How frustrating it must be for you, Your Majesty. You're about to add something, but the sound of a sword being pulled out of its sheath stops you. It seems too many buttons have been pressed, for the Emperor is but a raging, foolish man. That's enough. The sword points towards Heinley's throat. Prince Heinley, I challenge you to a duel for tarnishing my woman's honor. There is a pause in the air. You stare at the two men, occasionally glancing over to Navier, whose expression is furrowed. Can I leave this room safely even if I kill you? If so, I accept your challenge. You sigh, deciding that even if you did dislike Sovishu, it was a part of your duty to protect him. You are one of his followers after all. You open your mouth to speak, but Navier beats you to it, walking towards Sovishu's side to lower his sword. Your Majesty, please calm yourself. She then turns towards Heinley and you, and Prince Heinley. Lady Y/N, you are our guests. Please, would all of you stop? Each said person falls back down on their seats with different expressions. Heinley's being one of aloofness, Sovishu's one of irritation, and yours of, well, not much. You just put on a neutral expression to hide the fact that you and the Eastern Prince might have conspired together. We'll end dinner here. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. And with that, the Empress walks out of the dining room and stops by the entrance to bid the guests goodbye and apologize. You wait for everyone else to leave and only stand when the Grand Duke does, following after him when he walks to the entranceway. Grand Duke Kaufman. You call out to him, making him stop in his tracks. He turns to you and sighs before holding out an arm for you to take. You smile and happily hook your arm around his, discreetly feeling up his biceps. Nothing wrong with a little muscle check, right? Once you both reach the entranceway where Navier and Rashta stood, the silverette visibly copies Navier's pose. Grand Duke Kaufman, will you be coming to tomorrow's special banquet? She asks with a tone of attempted elegancy. You clench your jaw to prevent curses from spilling out of your mouth and only stare at the mistress with a blank look. She doesn't seem to pay attention to you, but it's obvious from the way she nervously plays with her fingers that your stare alone puts her off. You smile. The Grand Duke beside you doesn't respond to Rashta and only swivels away, also seemingly irritated with the silver-haired girl. You chuckle and walk with him down the hallway. You don't seem to like her. You start turning your head to look at him. And neither do you, he answers, side-eyeing you. You nod. She's a woman full of audacity, if I'm being completely honest. You sigh and shake your head before turning to focus of the pathway again. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that wench. This is your first time meeting Navier, right? I believe so, yes. She's a pretty lady, isn't she? She may seem strict and scary at first, but I swear, she can be the most childish sometimes. Everybody has that side of them, don't they? Really now? Then that must include you, right, Kaufman? You ask him teasingly and grin even wider when he doesn't respond. So, you do. How come I've never seen it? Again, he ignores you. You frown and continue asking him repeated questions to irritate him. It's the last day of the New Year's celebration, and unfortunately, the last day of your stay. You, including a limited number of other high society members, gather in the Red Rose Room where the banquet is held. Cheerful chatters and laughter fill the room as you enjoy the pleasant atmosphere and cherish it, knowing it would be the last time in a while that you'll be in a room full of high spirits. Lady I/N. You turn towards the voice to see none other than the Grand Duke Kaufman, clad in fabrics of black and gold. Kaufman, pleasant evening. You greet him with a smile. You seem to be planning something. I'm hoping it is nothing too drastic, he comments, sipping on a glass of champagne. You laugh and shake your head. You can tell so easily. But of course I'm not planning anything too drastic. In fact, my plan won't affect anyone in this room. Then, I'm guessing it will have something to do with the other banquet. Specifically, that mistress? He guesses, raising an eyebrow. Bingo. You know me all too well, Kaufman. The man shakes his head, feigning disappointment. Don't cause too much trouble. I don't think the Emperor would appreciate it. Oh, is this you telling me to go ahead and do it? I didn't know you were so malicious, Grand Duke. You tease. Well, I'd like to bid you a last farewell. This will be my last night in the Empire before I head back to the borders with Koshar. I see. Lord Koshar is the Empress' brother, yes? You nod, yes. I must go. I might miss the fun in the grand banquet hall. You turn and wave him goodbye, watching as he waves his glass to you as well. Stepping into the royal banquet hall, where there was certainly a bigger crowd, you search around for the mistress, trying to look discreet as you step around the large space, occasionally greeting nobles and having small talk with familiar faces. Finally, Rashta is within sight and earshot. Lady Rashta, didn't you say you were invited to the special banquet? A voice asks the lady. You. The silverette pauses, skillfully avoiding a tense reactions as she quickly smiles softly. It makes you gag. Well. I declined the invitation. I felt that it would be better for the Empire if someone who was better placed to represent us attended instead. You take her lie as a cue to step in, a grin spreading through your features as you greet the ladies, shifting a cunning grin into a sultry and inviting smile instead. They all turn to you, greeting you with happy smiles and excited eyes. You recognize these ladies to be one of the many you've helped into the social circle when they first debuted. Navier had instructed you to help them get along in order to have something cover up your bold reputation. Goodness, Miss Rashta, I didn't take you for a liar. The two noble ladies stare at you and the mistress in shock. Miss Rashta. She staggers. Why, you're the one who's lying. My goodness, no. These old friends of mine happen to know me very well, and they know better than anyone that I'd rather end my own life than to spit out lies. You dramatically put a hand on your chest, feigned hurt on your features as the two ladies nod at you. And I happen to be friends with the Empress and Emperor too. So, I know about how you whined and begged the Emperor to invite you to the special banquet despite the full invitation list. The Emperor even asked the Empress to invite you. Just imagine the hurt Empress Navier must be going through. You sigh, shaking your head as you place a palm on your cheek. Oh my. I didn't know Miss Rashta was like this. They both whisper to each other before leaving, hoping to avoid the awkward situation. You watch them leave with a grin and turn to the mistress with a click of your tongue. I don't understand how Sovishu could have possibly fallen in love with you, but I suppose that man has always been a fool. You whisper, loud enough for her to hear. She grits her teeth and looks away in shame, avoiding your gaze. You turn around, satisfied with what you've done, and walk to the center to mingle with other nobles. Never hurts to make new friends. The Emperor's mistress is a former slave of mine. You turn towards the voice who happens to say that aloud, surprised to see a viscount whose name was directly at the tip of your tongue. You approach him, but you're stopped when the sound of a glass shattering resonates through the ballroom. What is it now? You turn once again to see Rashta leaving in a hurry, a look of terror on her face. But it only grows when the viscount approaches her, a mocking grin on his face. You'd like to do business with him one day. My lady, the Emperor wishes to see you. The captain of the royal guard approaches you, a stern and nervous look on his face. You raise an eyebrow, but don't object, all right? Judging from the incident that had happened just a few moments ago, it was most likely that he'd blame you, knowing you went in the banquet hall before she made a scene. You follow the captain through the large hallways, not so discreetly admiring his ass as you walk behind him. If you were being fully honest, you've had an eye on him for quite some time. Once you reach the room, you see Navier leaving the room with a distant look in her eyes, lips no longer flat, and instead frowning by the slightest bit. It was obvious that Sovishu had said something to hurt her yet again. You slip a smile her way in hopes of comforting her, but she only nods at you, mouthing a thank you, and you know it's not enough to make it stop hurting. The only thing you could do was pray that Heinley was nearby to bring her spirits up. Entering the room, you're met with the satisfying sight of Rashta lying in bed with a wet rag on her feverish forehead and an irate expression on Sovishu's face. He had the audacity to be the annoyed one when he was the one who hurt the person who he swore on his life to love and bring nothing but happiness to? The lady is here. I'll take my leave. The captain bows, leaving and shutting the large oak doors. Do you have nothing to say to me? He asks, glaring at you. You shrug nonchalantly. What the fuck do you want me to say, Sovishu? I'm sorry I made her pass out. Well then, I'm fucking sorry. And just to let you know, I'm not as heartless as to literally do something too upsetting to her that she'd pass out. Pretty sure it was her old master that she served. He attended the party. I know what he did. Do you not want to apologize for causing her so much shame and embarrassment? He stands from his seat, his irritation quickly shifting to aggression. And why the fuck should I apologize to her? I'm only doing what I'm doing for Navier. Ever since Rashta's been here, you've done nothing but hurt and shame Navier. Do you know how many nights she's gone to bed with a heavy heart and trying her best not to keep it together? Because a whole fucking empire is depending on her? Oh, I'm sure you don't because you've been too busy fucking your damn mistress. You've spent your whole life together and you're throwing it all away, all for some dog you found in the forest. Do not cross the line, Y/N. I'll send to right back to slavery within a snap. Do not test me. For some reason, that stung. A lot. You've spent your whole life being friends with this man, and it took everything within you to tell him about the things you've gone through. Then he uses your trauma against you? Your tone shifts to a bitter one. Sure, send me to slavery. Let's see how many corpses you can afford to bury. Expect this whore's dead body included. Before he can answer, you turn around and leave, slamming the large doors. You hoped you'd leave in high spirits, but you certainly didn't expect leaving after one of your closest friends uses your own pain to keep you in check. You sigh, pinching your nose bridge as you walk through the hallways, avoiding crowds and eyes. Once they see you annoyed, they'd certainly spread word about it and start absurd lies about the emperor and the empress. Lady, I/N. You curse before contorting your features to a brighter one. You turn around, the usual arrogant smile adorning your lips. Baron Lant, is there something wrong? You ask, hands politely behind your back. He looks away before hesitantly opening his mouth to speak. I heard you and the Emperor argue just a few moments ago. I'd like to ask if you're all right. I'm all right, Baron Lant. Arguments are common between me and the Emperor. You coldly interject before turning your heels and walking away, leaving Baron Lant to stand alone in the hallway. You liked him, truly. You liked his looks. They reminded you that of a puppy's. You liked his personality too, entertaining with a heart of gold. But it was just a shame he supported Rashta, as petty as that sounds. It was obvious from the way he'd wince every time you uttered a word of offense to the mistress. You sigh and furrow your eyebrows, your irritation continuing to grow once more. If I stay here a day longer, I'm going to absolutely lose my shit. You mutter to yourself, unconsciously walking towards the greenhouse garden. The sun was now on its way to fall, the hues in the sky changing from an eyes-piercing, yet soul-soothing blue, to an eye-catching pink and orange. The reflections bounced off of the greenhouse, subtle colors now illuminating the surrounding area as a result. It was always a beautiful sight, no matter how many times you've seen it. You'd remember playing around here as children with Navier, Koshar, and Sovishu. Entering the garden and taking a seat, you slump against the chair to get your body to relax. Well, it wasn't the best thing to do considering that the chair was well made out of metal. You groan at the stifling feeling before straightening your back. God, I can't wait to go back. It's even more stress-free there. It was true. All you had to do was find some assholes, beat them half to death, and when you find them doing horrible things again, just kill them and be done with it. It isn't a long time before the sky is fully enveloped in a calming darkness, stars beginning to appear as the moon rose. Crickets sang their songs, birds flew back to their nests, and more insects came right out of their hiding spots. You still sat within the greenhouse garden, the warmth inside providing you more than enough comfort for the night. Perhaps you'd sleep here for the night. You didn't really have the energy to walk back such a far distance. But would Sovishu really send you to be sold? You shake your head violently. There was no need to think about that. Resting your upper body on the dining table, You let your head relax on your arms and close your eyes. You'd worry about all else tomorrow morning. I/N, wake up. Sovishu shakes your shoulders, trying his best to gently wake you through your well-deserved slumber. You groan, feeling irritation grow in your veins at the voice of the one man you didn't want to see. Of all people, he just had to be the one to find you first thing in the morning. I hope you're aware that you're the last person I wanted to see the moment I wake up. You mutter, not opening your eyes as you shrug off his hands. He pinches his nose bridge. Look, I didn't want to see you either. But I came to apologize. You don't respond, only burying your head deeper in your arms, if you're apologizing because someone told you, or if it's for the sake of it. I'm not accepting your apologies. You're half sure a few maids heard and gossiped about the argument you had with Sovishu yesterday, and it eventually ended up with Laura knowing and telling Navier. No, I do feel bad. I spoke out of anger yesterday. It wasn't my intention to use your trauma against you. You could hear the sincerity in his voice, but you were a petty woman. You didn't want to forgive him just yet. Sure, I accept your apology. Then, but only for the sake of it. You continue, smirking through your covered lips, still keeping your eyes closed. He loudly sighs. You've always been petty. He does know you forgive him, but it's gonna take him some more time to make you fully forgive him. If you'd like, I want Navier, you, and I to eat. Favorite food for breakfast? Just like the old days. No thanks. I have a few things to deal with. You quickly stand from your seat, running for the exit before he could say another word. No way in hell would you be sparing him the satisfaction of relieving the past just because he wants to make it up to you and because he wishes to. Things become complicated in the future, and it will always affect how you'll see the past from then on. After a long bath and a quick change of clothes, you made your way towards the capital city, the streets buzzing with crowds. It had been a while since you've greeted the townspeople, so you didn't see the harm in greeting and bidding them goodbye before you make your way back to the border. Big sis, you're back, one of the children call out, waving towards you and catching several people's attention. You smile nervously as they all gasp and rush towards you with big smiles and excited greetings. They surround you in a circle as a few of them call for others, exclaiming about how you'd finally returned from the borders. It's been a while. Let's drink in the tavern, like the good old days. Bah! It's far too early to be getting drunk. Lady I/N. Let's pick and rearrange flowers instead. No chance. I asked her to bake with me first. Like hell. She and my friends are going to play. You laugh awkwardly at all their exclamations, feeling even guiltier to have to tell them you'd be leaving in a few hours. Some of these people were the ones you'd grown up with after all, and some of the children were ones that have always looked forward to spending time with you after having heard of the stories circling about you. Sorry to tell you all, but I came here to say goodbye. You half scream, making sure they would hear you well. They gasp once again, this time upset and whiny. But you'd only just arrived. We really looked forward to playing with you. Surely just staying a few hours more wouldn't hurt. Now you were really tempted to stay. These people may not have been the richest, but they sure as hell made you feel happy. Even when doing an activity as boring as group book reading, they'd always make it so fun and entertaining. I'm really sorry, everyone. After getting them all to calm down and initiating a deal to spend time with them the next time you come back, you sit on the bench right before the palace's gates, waiting for your carriage to arrive. Excuse me, Lady I/N. You turn towards the butler, an eyebrow raising as you observe the hesitant look in his eyes. What is it? I'm afraid we'd have to postpone your leave. One of the bridges to the border seems to be having complications. Your carriage has been stranded there for a few hours, hence the wait, and they have decided to head back for the time being. He explains, one hand on his chest and the other on his back. Oh my God. You sigh with frustration and slump down on the chair, pinching the bridge of your nose as you motion for him to leave. Problems like this were very common, and usually it would take at least 2 weeks to fix. Well, that was if the bridge itself was broken and fully damaged. You just prayed that it wasn't too much of a casualty, and that not too many people were injured, and God forbid, dead. Now you were gifted, cursed, with a few free days. Well, at least you didn't have to leave feeling bad for the townsfolk. You'd just spend time with them today. It has been a few days since your supposed departure, and you were very worn out from all the things you'd been doing together with your people. Apart from the never-ending baking and flower arranging, you spent most of your evening having drinking contests with the usual men and women at the tavern. Occasionally, you played with the children too, running around the streets and chasing after them with fits of laughs and giggles. You didn't hate spending time with them, of course. It's just that the years will get to you and your energy, once never-ending, will be limited. Have you heard, Your Majesty? Duke Claude arrived at the palace today, Laura starts, eyes glistening and gossipy. I'm sure Her Majesty is already aware of this, Laura. Countess Eliza interjects, sipping on a cup of tea before setting it back down on the table. Does Her Majesty also know who the Duke was with all day? You and Navier think, taking a moment to pause. You had heard of that name multiple times when gossiping with the high society, and truth to be told, you were curious about him. Having heard of this said curse, he carries with him around ladies who wouldn't be so amused. Prince Heinley? Navier answers first. You nod, agreeing. Who else would the Duke be with, if not Prince Heinley? No. He was with the slave girl Rashta. Laura fumes, furrowing her eyebrows. You choke on the cookie you were munching on, quickly grabbing a glass of water to drown as Navier pats your back from her seat. Why in the hell would one of Heinley's friends be hanging around a girl with such reputation? There were 2 possible answers. Heinley was planning something, or he himself has malicious thoughts. Apparently, they spent the whole day together. I heard they seemed to get along well, and they both ended up getting involved in an incident that took place earlier today. They were taking a walk together when a nobleman humiliated Rashta by asking the Duke if he knew she was a runaway slave. And then, almost before he finished speaking, Duke punched him. You let them continue gossiping amongst each other, zoning out to curse Heinley. What kind of bullshit was he planning again? You were gonna get an answer one way or another. Hey, Laura, where does Duke currently reside in? You tap on Laura's shoulder, clad in clothes fit for men, from society's standards at least. But hey, you like to promote uniqueness. I believe he's at the South Palace with Prince Heinley, my lady. But why do you ask? Are you planning on something mischievous again? Could I join you? I hope you know it's only been 2 days since Duke has arrived, so perhaps we should give him some time to settle down. She eagerly asks, stars gleaming in her eyes. You chuckle and shake your head. Of course not, Laura. Duke just piques my interest. The lady-in-waiting frowns. That's what you always say. She huffs and stomps away, carrying a tray of snacks for the Empress and the rest of the ladies-in-waiting. Truly, you wanted to bring her in your endeavors. She was a fun gale, but when people discover that you've been messing around the castle with her, her reputation will surely tarnish. It was only for her own benefit that you were making up half-lies. You call one of the maids nearby. Good evening, dear. You purr. Could you call Duke to the West Garden, please? I've heard of him arriving just 2 days from now, so I'd like to. Give him a warm welcome. You give her a misleading wink that brings a blossom of blush to her cheeks. Oh, of course, my lady. She bows and rushes away, most likely to Rashta's quarters where he would hopefully be. If your guess proves right, then you'd get to see Rashta frustrated as she watches you and the Duke happily chatting away in the garden, just within sight of her room. No doubt she'd be protective over someone like the Duke. He's one of the handful of people who treat her nicely anyway. Duke Claude, Lady Y/N, has requested to see you in the West Garden. She has something she wishes to discuss, the maid states, as politely as she could possibly make it sound. Rashta frowns at your name, arms crossing as she sinks further into her seat like a whining child would. Ergi raises an eyebrow in confusion, hesitantly nodding before standing up. Heinley hadn't told him anything about a woman named I/N, so hearing that she suddenly requests to see him did make him a tiny bit anxious. The two leave the room, closing the door behind them with a click. Rashta makes a noise of irritation before rushing out to her balcony to get a closer view on you and the royal Duke. She dislikes you quite a lot more than she has despised anyone. You always insulted her and embarrassed her by stating her lies aloud, and Navier, on the other hand, didn't do anything awful even if she was the Empress. So, if she were to choose, she'd rather be with Navier than be alone with you. The Silverette watches you relax and sip on a glass of wine in the middle of the garden from a window, dressed in clothes the same way Grand Dukes would be dressed in. Her frown deepens even further when the Duke walks into the garden, the maid leaving as he takes his time to walk towards the chair opposite to where you sat. Ah, the all-famous Grand Duke Ergi. You grin and wave at him, swirling the glass of freshly made wine in your hands. He greets you with a smile, but the awkwardness in his eyes block its way from reaching them. Lady I/N. He speaks your name like it is alien, and he wishes his memory serves him right and prays that he doesn't say a different name to yours. He nods, forcing himself to relax in your presence, which helps in no way, and watches as you gracefully pour the grape wine into his glass, the etiquette deeply embedded into your skin. Say, I heard you are close friends with Prince Heinley. You start. Would you mind telling me more about him? I saw him during the New Year's celebration, and I must say, he holds a kind of beauty I've never seen anyone else have. You flutter your eyelashes and let out a suggestive giggle. It feels unnervingly natural. So that's what this woman is after, Ergi thinks to himself, taking the bottle of wine and taking a sip. A hum of delight leaves his lips as the flavor fills his empty satisfaction. It had been quite a while since he's tasted something so exquisite. Well, Prince Heinley is a simple man, my lady. He decides he doesn't favor anything too eye-catching or bland. Then, how about you, Duke? What type of things do you favor? Now that I'm seeing you up close, I will say your charms may hold competition to Prince Heinley's. You interject, resting your elbow on the table and following it with relaxing your jaw on your palm. You curve your lips into a tempting smile, their pale red tint screaming for Ergi's attention. Me? He asks, caught off guard. Perhaps he's been too used to having people ask him about Heinley, though he doubts that thought as he would often get a significant amount of women on his heels too. Well, I prefer women who value themselves over me, he answers honestly. Finding no point in lying, I'm quite aware that the standards for love is putting yourself over your lover. But if my own would do that, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't feel guilty for it. I want them to choose where they put their worth with rational thought. If they decide to put it before me, then I'm happy. If they decide to put me after themselves, then I'd be happy too. You hum and chuckle. Duke Ergi is quite the romantic. I see why many women find themselves falling for you. You're a man beyond looks after all. But you sit upright from your previous position. As much as I would like to know much more about you, I'd like to cut to the chase. What might you mean? You stand and bend over the table to gain a closer distance from his face. Although this is embarrassing to admit, I've admired you for a very long time. Your words leave your lips as whispers while you slowly push the wine glass away from him face. So please, won't you spare me this single moment and give me a kiss? You keep his gaze, eyes pleading as he feels words stop at his throat. A breathless chuckle leaves his lips. Perhaps a kiss on the cheek would do you a slight bit of satisfaction. I do like to keep things slow-paced after all. He leans in to place a chaste kiss on the skin of your cheeks. You smile, chuckling just as he did before moving to sit back down on your seat. I suppose that would be fair. We have only just met. He nods. You understand me. Rashta rushes towards the garden, a mortified look on her face. She watched you and the Duke conversate with big smiles, and the sight of him leaving a kiss on your cheek only seemed to deepen her horror. If she doesn't interfere, then she'd lose another one of her friends. Ignoring the loud protests of the surrounding maids, she pushes past them and runs to the middle of the garden, angry to see you and the Duke laughing together. Ergi turns to her, a slightly irritated expression, but it quickly morphs into a kind one. There's your answer. Miss Rashta, what brings you here? The Duke and I were just having a lovely conversation. Care to join for a drink? You smile knowingly at her, motioning your glass of liquor towards her. It tastes delectable, you add with a grin. She composes herself. Not really. She still had that ungodly look on her face she always does. And no thank you, lady. You/N. I feel really full right now. Her voice quivers as her hands clutch her thick skirt. The Duke watches the interaction between you and the mistress, an eyebrow raising as he begins to wonder what type of relationship you had to create such an odd atmosphere. Well, if you're not here for a drink, then what are you here for? You break the short silence. The Emperor is not here, by the way, and neither is the Empress if you were hoping to ruin her day again. She feels embarrassment sink into her bones once more. For what she feels like is the 1,000th time. She cannot talk back. My lady, I'm afraid what you said is quite out of line. Ergi interjects, laughing awkwardly. Ms. Rashta may have the favor of the Emperor, but that doesn't mean she likes to show it off directly to the Empress. Rashta gleams happily at his words. That's right. I'm sorry if that came out as offensive. I was simply joking around. You laugh, waving a hand dismissively as you drink from the glass. I'll send out gifts of apology for you. Of you wish so, Lady Rashta. You mock her, eyes gleaming in mischief as she grits her teeth. There's no need for that. Lady, some jokes may prove more harmful than harmless if we are being careless. The Duke's voice is firm, eyes feigning rage, but you can see the laughing undertones beneath them. You had to say, he was truly a good actor. No wonder Prince Heinlein had chosen him out of all his friends. You give him a smile that tells him you know. I'm well aware, but I have apologized already, haven't I? He feels taken aback, but he tells himself that you don't know, that you're simply playing buffs. But he knows he'll regret lying to himself in the future. He'll have to confront you when Rashta isn't in the way. But look at the time. It's almost past lunchtime. Means I have to resume with my duties. You loudly mutter the last part, making sure Rashta is convinced that you actually have work to do. You stand from your seat and bow to the Duke, excusing yourself as you swivel past Rashta. Why would you bow to someone who was as low as a rat? The duo watches as you leave, the glass of wine you once held now emptied and resting on the table. Duke Ergi, please do not spend time with her anymore. She is a rude woman to me. She whimpers. I've been nice towards her, but she's always bullying me. Her cries break out from her throat as Duke Ergi stands to comfort her with a hug. a grin enveloping his lips, as soon as his face is out of her sight. He should be here in 3, 2, and... My fair lady. His smooth voice calls. You grin, dropping it into a friendly smile before you turn to Duke Urgi. What brings you here, Duke? I was just about to enjoy my early dinner meal. You state before turning once more. You head to the garden this time, the one nearest to your quarters. You're sure he'd be much more cautious of people watching this time around. You've also sent the maids and prepared an excuse for the lack of servants, so he wouldn't grow wary. Although I do apologize for the emptiness. I usually prefer to dismiss the maids and butlers before eating my meal. I like to enjoy my food alone. You lie as you walk, taking a seat once you've arrived by the dining space. He smiles, shaking his head dismissively. It's quite all right. I understand your preferences. He pauses, taking his own seat and looking around. You have quite a variety of gardens in the Eastern Empire. Are your people perhaps fond of them? He asks, curious, but you know this is him trying to confirm something. Inwardly raising an eyebrow, you decide to answer honestly. Oh, no. You answer, feigning fluster. I actually really enjoyed trees and flowers as a child. So naturally, when the emperor took notice of my likings, he had different kinds of gardens built for me. He looks like he's gotten his answer. You almost blurt out a noise of confusion, thinking of which part of your sentence answered an indirect question. It takes you less than a while to figure it out. He wanted to know if you were close with the imperial family. You wondered why he wanted that information. It was common knowledge that you were practically of royal blood. But then again, he wasn't from the Eastern Empire. Shall I have another set of meal brought? They've only prepared one for me, as per usual. They did not expect you to come, it seems. You offer, tucking a leg under the other as you make yourself comfortable in your seat. Oh, I'm all right. I'm afraid I'm still full as I've eaten late lunch just a few hours ago. I'd like to stay here and chat though, if you're comfortable with that. He smiles, leaning onto the table as he rests his chin on his palm. He watches as you nod and smile, picking up the knife and fork from the sides of the dish. The blade slices into the steak, remnants of flavor flowing from within, as you part the meat with ease. It looked absolutely appetizing. Steak for dinner? He asks, not noticing the tone of rudeness within the question itself. You laugh, quite audacious of you to judge a lady's meal, Duke. You tease. You didn't truly mind. For now, you didn't have to worry about getting answers, as you've already gotten them earlier today. It was his turn to have questions answered. Oh, I apologize, my lady. I was just curious, as it isn't a usual dinner meal. He apologizes. Are you perhaps fond of meat? You nod, piercing the fork through the smaller piece of meat you sliced and bite into it. I am. You hum happily at the savory flavors, relishing in the small sweetness of the seasonings and sourness from the lemon. The chef never fails to please you. I see, I am too. My mother has always cooked steak for me when I was much younger. He chuckles, still continuing to watch you eat. You shuffled uncomfortably. Is the truth serum from the wine still affecting him? You question yourself, chewing on the meat. I see. Were you perhaps a mother's boy? You ask, half teasing as you grin widely. Koshar had also been a mother's boy at some point in his life. The Duchess would spoil him with sweets until he grew and became naughty. Well, I'd be lying if I said no. He laughs, awkwardly scratching his nap as he looks away. It's unfortunate that she has fallen ill. You blurt out without thinking, your gaze leaving his for a moment to slice more pieces off of your steak. All of a sudden, he stands up and grabs you by the collar, a violent look in his eyes as he grits his teeth. You stare back at him in surprise, eyes widened and mouth agape. Duke, you manage to choke out without stuttering. a bead of sweat rolling down your cheek. Thought I was still under the influence of that truth serum? He chuckles, lips carving up to a grin. His emerald eyes dig into your soul, searching for secrets that he knows won't ever leave your lips. The way he looks at you tells you he's knowing, yet at the same time unknowing. It irks you for a second, but you refuse to let him affect you. Seems I've been caught, you awkwardly admit, raising your hands in defeat. This wasn't much of one anyway. You've gotten enough answers. What are your actual plans, my lady? He insists, leaning closer to your face as he still doesn't let you down. The collar is beginning to restrict your breathing, but your instincts refuse to show weakness. Don't get me wrong, Duke. I'm just a mad woman in love. You cough, the skin between your eyebrows crinkling as you wince painfully. Hopefully that lie was enough to be seen as logic. You're aware of rumors about ladies going too far with their obsessions, so why not use that as your loophole? He finally lets you down, but keeps his hand crunched with your collar in his fist. I've heard about women going mad with love, but his tone tells he knows you're lying. I hadn't thought I'd have a personal encounter with one of them. You don't respond, and for once you're backed into a corner you didn't know you were being pushed into. You didn't think he'd be aggressive. With no words exchanged, he lets you go and walks away. The night is young, and time has come for young teenagers to sneak out. That includes Duke Ergi, except he wasn't a teenager. Quiet chatter filled the room of Prince Heinley, all the maids and butlers, long retired into their chambers. The only ones on duty are the knights, but they are far and stationed around the gates of the palace. So you've met I/N? The blonde man grins, wondering if that certain noble lady had tricked his dear friend. Oh, of course. Ergi chuckles, guessing that Heinley was indeed acquainted with you. She tricked me into drinking a truth serum. Perhaps I let my guard down far too soon. He lightly scolds himself. Though I'm surprised she's going along with your petty plan. Heinley freezes, and this makes the Duke raise an eyebrow in growing nervousness. Whoa, what? She knows of our plans? He asks, biting his inner cheek, brows furrowed. Did you not tell her? Ergi asks, knowing the answer is as obvious as the concern in Heinley's expression. The blonde prince shakes his head. I suppose she wouldn't mind, considering as she holds great resentment for that mistress. And by the way, how were you aware of the truth serum in your drink? I heard from around that it's quite the challenge to figure out if it spiked your drink. Heinley asks, genuinely interested. I'll be honest, I hadn't suspected anything until I found myself wanting to see her more. I only confirmed my suspicions when I took a risk and grabbed her by the collar. From my fantastic view, I could see the empty bottle from her in pockets. I'm glad truth serum bottle have a unique design to them. Duke Ergi chuckles, shaking his head. Heinley pauses, a shit-eating grin stretching his lips. Why would you want to see her more? I do hope you know that wanting to see a person desperately is most definitely not an effect of the serum. I'd say it's more of a, love effect? Why would she include a love potion in my drink? Exactly, Ergi. She wouldn't.